It might be chilly in Broncos country, but there is still a buzz in the air following the hire of Nathaniel Hackett as the 18th Broncos head coach. We'll look at the head coach's first week in Denver, the legacy of a Hall of Fame owner in Broncos country, and whether this year's Hall of Fame class could see a Broncos legend forever enshrined in Canton. Welcome into Broncos Weekend, everybody. I'm Matt Boyer alongside the Hall of Famer Steve Atwater. Steve, the last time we were on this set, the Broncos were mulling over 10 candidates, and in the end, George Paton and his search committee, they land on Nathaniel Hackett, the offensive coordinator from the Green Bay Packers, to be the next head coach for the Denver Broncos. As far as winning the fan base goes, Steve, when Hackett arrived, he got great reviews. What impressed you most when he arrived here at UC Health Training Center, met the staff, and met with the media?
Well, he's a fun-going, high-energy, positive attitude guy. I really enjoyed watching all the interviews that he did. He seems like he has that energy all of the time. But a couple of things from his interviews that I really enjoyed was him explaining that working with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, and Aaron Rodgers, he required you to explain why he was doing something, and he had the patience to do that. I think that's a great characteristic for coaches, and also seeing him on the phone call with Justin, connecting with the players right away. We're all very fond of Justin, and to see him on the phone call with them that soon and connecting with the players right now, that warmed my heart.
Two things immediately stood out to me, Steve, about his philosophy. One, he feels like things need to be high energy, right? He talked about music at practice, energy in the meetings. I think that's going to be big for his leadership style. The other thing, and you just touched on it, things being led by the players leading the team. He said that you've got to have player-led teams to win championships. How do you think the players, and you just mentioned Justin Simmons, how do you think the players as a whole are going to respond to his style, that energy? And does he remind you of any coaches that you've seen previously?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had any coaches that were as lively as he is. But I think that the players will take to it well, a majority of them. Now, there will be some players that, nothing's going to make them happy. They're going to be the spoilers and, the guys who make parties kind of not fun. But for the most part, I think that they'll buy in and they'll enjoy it. And it'll make the team better because the guys feel like they're having a good time. They'll enjoy coming to work, and the more they enjoy it, the earlier they'll come and the later they'll stay.
Not many coaches boast his range of expertise, right? A neurobiology major, spent time as a hip-hop dancer in college. So
yes.
He's definitely one of one when it comes to his skill set, his style, and his approach. Steve, I want to look at some of the players, though, that could see huge gains from this hire, right? Obviously, all the players will hopefully benefit by having a guy like Nathaniel Hackett as a head coach. But in particular, a couple guys that I want to spotlight. First, Javonte Williams. In his previous stops, Nathaniel Hackett has had an affinity for running the football. So the comparison between he and Leonard Fournette, Williams and Leonard Fournette, has been made in the past. Fournette had one of his best seasons with Hackett in Jacksonville. So what do you think the workload could be like for Javonte Williams in 2022?
Yeah, like you said, the 2017 season, that was the season that Leonard Fournette had 1,040 rushing yards. I think he had about 300 yards receiving as well. I think that Javonte would love that type of productivity and also to be able to get the ball in his hands and show those good soft hands that he has catching the ball, both he and Melvin Gordon. And I know a lot of people are hoping that Melvin Gordon is not going to be here. I'm a Melvin Gordon fan. I think we're a better team with Melvin Gordon. But yeah, I think Javonte and Melvin, they'll be looking forward to, getting the ball in various situations, not only on the run, but also receiving a lot more passes than they did this last year.
Packers running back Aaron Jones certainly benefited a lot from that LaFleur-Hackett offense. First two seasons with Jones, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, 25 touchdowns over that time frame. So hopefully, if Javonte Williams looking at those numbers, you've got to be pretty happy. On the receiving side of things, Steve, in the passing game, Courtland Sutton, the big play receiving threat, Devontae Adams in Green Bay, one of the best wide receivers during his time with Nathaniel Hackett. What do you think Courtland Sutton looks at when he sees the style of offense that Nathaniel Hackett might be bringing to the Broncos?
Well, I would say not only Courtland Sutton, but I would say Tim Patrick's looking at it. I'd say Jerry Jeudy's looking at it, KJ Hamler, and they're seeing the receivers catch balls in different positions. They're lining up all over the field, and they're catching short routes, deep routes, intermediate routes. Just a lot of creativity to that offense, and I think they're kind of licking their lips, looking forward to getting more targets.
Early on in the season, especially that Jacksonville and Pittsburgh game, Steve, Courtland Sutton showed big playability. The Broncos didn't really push the ball down the field that much towards the end of the season, but seeing that in the beginning of the season of 2021 showed me that Sutton, back from that injury, the big playability is still there. So taking some of those deep shots down the field, like Nathaniel Hackett mentioned in his press conference, I think are going to be there, like you said. Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, Sutton, they're all going to be licking their chops when they see that ball.
That's right. That's right. It's going to be coming.
Down the field, exactly. We focused a lot on offense, Steve, just now, but defense, I think there's some big opportunities on defense for some of these players. And you just mentioned Justin Simmons. I want to talk a little bit about Simmons because the leadership factor, Hackett wanting to give the leadership to the players, have them step in, have more of an authoritative voice day to day. How big do you think that's going to be for a guy like Simmons, who's already established himself as a quintessential leader here for the Broncos?
Well, I think it'll be quite similar to the way that it was. I think that Coach Fangio and Justin had a great relationship, and Coach Fangio thought the world of Justin and gave him a lot of leeway. And I think that case will be real similar here with Coach Hackett in terms of him trusting Justin and really kind of letting Justin have a say-so in how things are going on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that'll be great.
You mentioned the FaceTime with Hackett and Justin Simmons. Do you feel like, even though he's an offensive guy, that connection's going to be there with those guys on the defensive side of the ball?
Oh, well, Coach, he can interact with anybody. we saw that throughout the interviews. We saw it in his first interaction with Justin. He said, "Hey, I got to warn you, man, I'm a hugger." So with that type of personality, I think everyone on the team, everyone in the building is going to have a great relationship with him.
Our good friend Mike Kliss from 9 News has reported that Denver might be eyeing some coaches for the Rams on the defensive side of the football, so we wouldn't hear any announcement about that until probably after the Super Bowl. But like you said, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for guys like Simmons, Shelby Harris, the big defenders, the big leadership guys on the defensive side of the ball to kind of step up in a big way here as we move into 2022. We've got to take a quick break, but when we come back on Broncos Weekend, there will be a transition of ownership in Broncos country. So with that, we are taking a look back on the legacy of Pat Bowlen. Don't go anywhere.
There's only 4 words. This one's for Todd.
And lastly, I'd like to thank my family and my close friends who without whose support I would never be here. 4 words. This one's for you.
If there was a Mount Rushmore of NFL owners, you can bet that Broncos country would demand Pat Bowlen's likeness be on it. Welcome back to Broncos Weekend, everybody. Steve, I know the news about the sale process beginning for the Denver Broncos this week had to be tough. I know you had a personal relationship with Mr. Bowlen. When you heard the news, though, your personal feelings, your emotions, what kind of take me through that whole thing? Yeah,
I really had mixed emotions about it. I was happy on the one end that the family is going to get some closure to it. Broncos country is finally going to know who the new owner of the team is going to be. But the other side of it is knowing Mr. Bowlen. I knew that he wanted to have this football team and his family forever, and for that not to happen, it's a little bit sad because I know that would have been his wishes.
We're not going to speculate on the future, Steve, right now. Instead, we're going to look back on his legacy, his accomplishments, and they were extensive. The winning seasons, the Super Bowls. Steve, you know better than anybody. You don't get a gold jacket in football for nothing, and Mr. Bowlen was one of the few NFL owners to receive a spot in Canton, Ohio. As a player, though, Steve, on a day-to-day basis, why do you think he was able to connect with players in the way that he did? Because it seemed like he had a really strong bond with a lot of the guys that walked through these doors.
Yeah, I think, first of all, it was important to him to connect with the players and really everybody in the organization. There was a level of respect for him because he had so much passion for the game, so much passion for this organization. He wanted to see people do well. He did a great job of leading us. He did a great job of, expecting the players to do good things in the community. And, we got the relationship with the Denver Boys and Girls Club. He started so many wonderful things, and, he'll never be forgotten.
What do you think about his lasting legacy, Steve? You mentioned it. What do you think it'll be for the fans? You just mentioned it. His community involvement was huge, establishing the Broncos Boys and Girls Club. Broncos are still the only NFL franchise to have its own Boys and Girls Club. He's a Mizell Award winner in the city of Denver. What do you think his lasting legacy will be here amongst Broncos country at large?
Oh, man, well, for diehard Broncos fan, it's going to be bringing those 2 Super Bowl victories, actually 3 Super Bowl victories.
3 Super Bowls, exactly.
But also just making the players and everyone know how important the community is, how important the state of Colorado is, and to never take that for granted.
This one's for John, to this one's for Pat. It's been an amazing legacy. It's been an amazing run, and I know Broncos country is very grateful to have that time with Pat Bowlen as the owner of the Denver Broncos. We've got to take a quick break, but when we come back on Broncos Weekend, the Hall of Fame class of 2022 will be announced next week. We'll take a look at the names to know and which Broncos could land in Canton in future years. That's next. Welcome back into Broncos Weekend, everybody. All right, Steve, we are now 6 days away from the class of 2022 for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, something you might be interested in.
A little bit.
yeah, I know. As we look at the 15 modern era finalists, Steve, for the Hall of Fame this year, each of these guys, as you know, this is an excruciating process.
Yes.
Each of these guys is deserving of a spot in Canton. So, all of that being said, when you look at the 15 finalists, the modern era finalists for this year's class, which names stand out to you? Who do you think is going to get the proverbial knock when it's announced during the NFL Honors Ceremony on February the 10th?
Well, we both know one is a shoo-in.
Who's that?
DeMarcus Ware.
Of course.
He's a shoo-in. He's a beast of a player, great guy, had an amazing career in Dallas, and then came here and helped the Denver Broncos win another Super Bowl. So he's number one on the list in terms of just, I know he'll be a first ballot guy. But there's some other guys. Tony Baselli, he's been a finalist several years in a row. I know it's getting super frustrating for him. That's no guarantee he's going to get in, but I'd be willing to bet that it's his time now. It
won't show up on the stat sheet, Steve, but DeMarcus Ware, the impact that he had on Von Miller's career, right, pushing that defense from 2014 through 2016 to the levels that which they reached. I mean, the fact that the no-fly zone fed off of that pass rush, I mean, everything kind of went through Ware and Manning during that Super Bowl run in 2015. Again, not going to show up on the stat sheet, but definitely a guy that belongs in Canton, Ohio with a Hall of Fame bust, don't you?
Yeah, and I think all the secondary will agree with you on that. Without a great defensive line, without a great pass rush, it's very difficult to cover for 4 or 5 seconds.
A couple of other names I want to get to, Steve. When we talk about this on a yearly basis, there are so many Broncos deserving of a spot in Canton, Ohio. Guys that have retired already, I want to focus on right now. There are guys like Von Miller, maybe Chris Harris Jr. at the end of their careers, guys with Bronco tenures that will likely find themselves in the Hall of Fame conversation. We're going to put those guys to the side right now and focus on the retired guys. The first guy I want to focus on, Randy Gradishar, Steve. The Orange Crush, as you know, does not have a member in the Hall of Fame.
How in the world does that happen?
How disappointing is that?
It's very disappointing. I would imagine, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Steel Curtain, some of those guys wondering, like, how the heck does Denver not have anybody from that Orange Crush defense in there? Randy Gradishar is a guy that we know, we love him. We know that he deserves to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And they've already made the seniors picks for this year. But I'm hoping maybe next year it'll be time for him. 7
Pro Bowls, 6-time All-Pro. Steven, this is the one that gets me. 20 interceptions for a middle linebacker. You gotta have some hands.
Yeah, man. I wish I had those hands.
Don't say yourself short. You still had 24.
I know, but I should have way more than that.
Okay.
But I am happy for Randy. He had great hands, great pursuit to the ball, great communication. And all you got to do is go look up Randy Gradishar, look up the highlights on him, man. He could be a superstar in any era.
Speaking of hands and interceptions, Steve, the next guy I want to get to is Aqib Talib.
Yes.
Now, an all-pro with the Broncos, 10 pick sixes for his career.
Wow.
What made him such a dominant corner in your mind? He's not eligible yet. He will be within the next couple of years. What do you think may set him apart in his NFL career?
Oh, his mindset. He had you beat mentally before you stepped on the field. Most offensive guys, receivers, he'd be in their heads when they stepped on the field. In addition to that, he had great hands, great return abilities. He was a fighter out there on the field, a leader on the field, and he knows football too. He was a student of the game as well. Just a great player. It was fun to watch him, fun to see that passion show out there on the field.
The physicality you just mentioned, it usually takes top billing, but with Aqib, the film study, just his ability to be prepared for a game. Chris Harris Jr. and he would always go at it on the sidelines about what they were seeing on the field, and those two guys were always some of the most prepared guys I've seen on an NFL field. And it showed up in the picks, in identifying the defenses or the offenses, getting guys in the right position. I think that stuff does not get enough credit. It doesn't necessarily show up on the stat sheet, but those guys definitely as prepared as you would find on an NFL field when they played together. Last but certainly not least, Steve, we spoke about Dan Reeves last month after his unfortunate passing. So I want to cover another coach now and his Hall of Fame candidacy. Ring of Famer Mike Shanahan, your old head coach, Broncos head coach from 1995 through 2008. The Rams and the Bengals, Steve, I feel like it's appropriate to talk about Mike now because the Rams and the Bengals both borrow heavily from the offense that was established here by Mike and Coach Alex Gibbs in the run game. How much momentum do you think Mike has now with the Rams, the Bengals, the 49ers, and even the Green Bay Packers, the Nathaniel Hackett offense? How much do you think Mike's momentum has gained through these last couple of years, just seeing the prevalence of his offense in the NFL?
I think it's gained a lot of momentum. I think his offense, his coaching tree has really done well by him, and they're representing him well. Both teams in the Super Bowl. Was it all four teams in the
conference championships?
So that says a lot. That not only is the system, but he taught the system. Most of those guys were there with him in Washington. He was coaching in Washington, and they were young guys then, and they learned well, and they took what they learned and are creating trees for themselves.
Nathaniel Hackett said in his press conference when he was hired, that West Coast offense scheme, the outside zone run, play action, the deep passes. He remembers those deep passes growing up as a Chiefs fan. His dad was a coach for the Chiefs, seeing McCaffrey, Smith, Sharp catching those deep balls down the field. It made the hair stand up on the back of your neck a little bit, didn't you? Just the excitement hearing that.
Well, the thing is, we had great battles back then, so it's okay if he was a fan back then because we hadn't had their number. Unfortunately, right now they've had our number the last few years.
That being said, that offense and Mike Shanahan definitely deserving of a spot 100%. In Canton, Ohio, hopefully within the next couple of years. That's going to do it for us today on Broncos Weekend. Special thanks to the Hall of Famer, Steve Atwater. I'm Matt Boyer. So long, Broncos Country. We will see you next time.